we saw that how the Gospels had influenced a 3rd century Christian writing. Now we're seeing that this Jewish writing, which we know was written in Lower Galilee, and I will take you through that. I want to show you where we're going to go. It was composed in Galilee. Sometimes for popular audiences, I refer to it as the Einsteins of antiquity. And I am certainly convinced, I'm not going to be talking to you as a scholar who says, you know, we really can't figure it out. I don't know how to say it. It is certain to me that Jesus was influenced by these people because he was moving around and talking with the great minds. He was a great mind. He was a Jew. They were Jews, the same time of Judaism. And when you go through all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, God is the judge. If you go through the Old Testament, God is the judge. If you go through the Pseudepigrapha and Apocrypha, God is the judge, except in the parables of Enoch. And when you read Jesus' sayings in all the Gospels, he is always the one that uses the term Son of Man. It's not in Paul, and the evangelists use it only when they attribute it to Jesus. So we know he used it, so what does that mean? And he says, when the Son of Man comes, he will be a judge. What a shock! A shock wave. We now know that he most likely got this from the community that gave us the parables of Enoch. Now you see where we're going. I'm going to try to show you why I am convinced. You know, I'm not interested in anybody else being convinced. I have to be convinced, and it's taken 40 years to put this together. Okay, so that's where we're going. All right, we're going to be looking at the Wadi Hammam, the Arbel, and the Nittai. And this is the Hermon range. Here's the Hermon. Why is that important? I'm glad you asked, because I want to explain it to you. And here's the Hermon on the topographical map. Here is the Jordan Rift Valley, the water flowing out of the mountains of Lebanon, up, not here, up that way, and down from the Hermon. If you stood there, you could look down into Damascus. The water flows into the Sea of Galilee, which is the only freshwater lake in Israel. The Dead Sea is not. You can see, maybe you can read some of this. I can't. Even on this you can't. I had it memorized. So what we have here is Capernaum, and what we have here is what we're going to be looking at Migdal. And can't we focus this because it was so clear? So maybe it will come when we go. What we'll do is get a feeling of the topography. And Jesus came down from Nazareth and would have gone the Wadi Hammam. Wadi Hammam, you see, even most of the times is pretty wet. Will be very important because I will show you we have found a synagogue. And I'm going to make a claim that the parables of Enoch were composed there, okay? I'm going to say a lot of things that are very clear to me. If I were in an academic audience, I would say it differently. By academic, I mean all the hounds of heaven. I would say something like, although you idiots don't grasp this, the people who go to the BAS understand it almost the moment I mention it. All right, so you get an idea. All right, now this is good. You can see it. Here is Migdal. Here's Capernaum. Here's Kibbutz Kana, Yodetfat. And this is Nazareth. So you can even see it up here. Jesus, as you all know, leaves Nazareth and he goes down. This is how he would go. You can see topographically how he would go. And he would enter right into a synagogue, most likely, because a synagogue means soon with ago, come together, where Jews come together. All right. So, and he makes his base at Capernaum or Capernaum. Now, I will be trying to explain to you, it's in this area that the parables of Enoch were composed about the time of Jesus or a little bit before, and I'll try to explain that to you. I'm trying to tell you my conclusions, and you think, how the heavens would he get there? Thank you. All right, now again we get an idea of the topography of the land. Migdal, Capernaum. And those who go with me on these special tours, I'm renting special cabins so you can look down and see the sunset, and then we will gather in the evening. It's called the Kinnereth because it looks like a Kenor, the hymn used, the lyre used by David. Here we see the Sea of Galilee between Capernaum and Migdal. This is what it looks like today. You can see the Golden Heights. You can see this beautiful, beautiful lake. And those who go with me, we will have several worship services for Jews and some for Christians, and we have the Eucharist there on the sea, beside the Sea of Galilee, and those who are Christians in the Garden of Gethsemane. And those who go are Jews find this very moving because it's a celebration of Pesach. Again, we're picking up, you say, we saw it before. This was my way of introducing to you. It's here that in 37, a man named Herod, who was going to be called Great, finally wiped out all the people that were opposing him, the Hasmoneans. And he had huge engines built here and the wooden catapults coming down, and the men would go in and kill the men and the women and the children. And this is where he now is de facto king of the Jews. And Jesus, 40 years later, comes wandering down from Nazareth and makes his way. Yes, you're absolutely right. Everything is important for you to see. The water, the mud, and what would happen. Now here you have three of my cohorts. We're down exploring the area where Jesus would have come in, the residential section of first century Migdal, the ancient road, we found it, how Jesus would come into Migdal here. And now what I want you to see is that we didn't have any synagogues from the 3rd century. Just to the left of where we were standing, we find a beautiful synagogue, as you can see, with columns and benches. And here is the mountain that I pointed out, the Wadi Hammam we've come through, and Nittai up above. Okay. Now this explains to you where we are as scholars. Every biennial, that is every 2 years, the top scholars on Enoch come together, and we've come to this conclusion, okay? That we have the Book of the Watchers, that is chapters 1 through 36 of the books of Enoch. We dated between 300 and 200 because the Watchers seem to portray and represent the Diadochoi. Those are the great generals that followed Alexander the Great after his death. So they're marching over the earth, and it's based upon an interpretation of Genesis 6. So we can date it about 300 to 200. We do have fragments from Qumran that strengthen this dating. Then we have the Book of the Luminaries, which is 72 to 82, or the books, the astrological books of Enoch, and we know it dates before 200 BC. Then we have the dream visions. Enoch has dreams, 83 through 90 chapter in the books of Enoch. We dated about 160 because of the last person is Judas Maccabeus. We have the Epistle of Enoch, this chapters 91 to 105. We're guessing that sometime before 100. That's the best we can do. Then we have the parables of Enoch. That's chapter 37 to 71. We date it 37 when Herod becomes de facto king, and 66 when, in fact, the revolt begins. So most of us put it near the end of the 1st century or the beginning of the 1st century, the end of the 1st century BCE or the beginning of the 1st century CE. They're taking this for you so you can buy this later, so you don't have to take copious notes. It's more important that you really listen carefully and write notes. I want to ask him, how could he say that? Then we have the birth of Noah, which is very important. I've just sent to the publisher the Book of Noah, the birth of Noah, and many Noah compositions that we found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And now we have the birth of Noah in the books of Enoch. And we date it prior to 100. And there's another book of Enoch. It's in chapter 108. It's not clear, is it prior to 37? But what is really exciting is the parables of Enoch are now being dated just prior to Jesus. Okay? That is a quantum leap. It's a paradigm shift. What we thought was 3rd century Common Era Christian influence by the Gospels turns out to be, by consensus, every Enoch scholar says it's Jewish. We think it's Lower Galilee, just before Jesus. And could it have influenced Jesus? And I am arguing if you don't open your eyes to that possibility, to me it's a certainty, then I think you're not learning. This is a tremendous paradigm shift. I've been lecturing since, let's say, 1960? So it's a long time. And this is the greatest paradigm shift I've ever seen in our field. So I'm very excited to share this with you, but I don't expect you to be convinced at this stage. Give me 10 minutes. All right, now Mount Hermon, I told you I would explain why it's important. The watchers, that is the fallen angels, do not descend on a spot in Judea. They descend on Mount Hermon in Upper Galilee. This is the quotation from 1 Enoch 6:6, the book of Enoch, chapter 6, verse 6. And the fallen angels were altogether 200, and they descended into Ardos, which is the summit of Hermon. So whatever you know, you can say this was not composed in Judea. Probability would say somewhere in Galilee. Why would they say it's Hermon? Now, when you're in Galilee, whether it's Upper Galilee or whether it's Lower Galilee, there'll be times when you're absolutely astounded at the beauty of Hermon. You say, prove it to me. I love you. You're wonderful, asking the great questions. There it is. Mount Hermon, seen from the southern end of the Kinnereth. Making my point, you people say, if I'm in Migdal, I can't see Hermon. Let's go even farther south. So from Migdal, you can clearly see Hermon. Here we are on the southern end of the Kinnereth. You know, it's a Sea of Galilee, but you run out of space, so it's a Kinnereth. Here we are standing, and you can see it. It's massive. And you say, can you show me another one? Yes. This is Mount Hermon, which the author of Enoch says, and this is from Rosh Pinah. It's a pity, because if it was dark in here, you would be able to see that you have the earth, and then it looks like you have the beginning of the sky, and then above the sky you have the Hermon mountain. Beautiful, covered with snow. And this is the best example I can give you. We have all the lights on so that my face will appear. I don't want my face to appear in this, but there's nothing we can do about it. I'd rather you be able to see this, but maybe you can see I've had many mystical moments when I've looked up and thought, this is the earth, this is the sky, and the Mount Hermon is above the sky. What a perfect place for the Jewish mystics to say, it was on Mount Hermon, Linda, that the watchers, the evil angels, descended when they came from heaven. Okay? Then we continue, the waters of Dan. In 1 Enoch 13:7, it says, and I went, Enoch says, and sat down upon the waters of Dan, in Dan, which is on the southwest of Hermon. Many of you will be there with me. Many of you have been there. Some of you said, now this is 15 years you've been lecturing to me. Can I learn something new? Thank you. I'm trying. Give me a little bit more time. So you see the reference to Hermon and Dan, both of them in the Upper Galilee. So what do we conclude? If the author is referring to places in Galilee, the supposition is if we have any knowledge about where he composed it, it wasn't in Baltimore. Point clearly made, right? That he's referring to things he knows. The waters of Dan. All right. The rushing waters of Dan. The waters come out of the Lebanon range from Mount Hermon, and they come gushing right out. It explodes out. And I hope this gives you an idea of the water pouring out, and certain times of year, not now, a little bit later, like 3 months, we can go and explore, and there's huge waterfalls just pouring out of the mountains, pouring out of the hills. But he is referred to Dan, which means he probably knows about Dan, okay? It flows into what we call the Jordan River as it pours through the Hula Valley. The Hula Valley will be very important. I'm glad you're still alive and still listening, and that's where we're going to be going, to the Hula Valley. Now, what is new about the parables of Enoch? Here's the old paradigm. Christian, 3rd century, influenced by the Gospels. The new paradigm, not Christian Jewish, not 3rd century, common era, written prior to or contemporaneous with Jesus, not influenced by the Gospels, but probably influenced many in the Palestinian Jesus movement. I'm urging people to use that term because we have to get confessionalism out of our scientific research. And you don't refer it to the church. But you refer to in Palestine, there was a movement connected with Jesus. That's a very neutral term, especially Jesus and the compilers of the gospel. This is a paradigm shift. Why are scholars changing their understanding of the parables of Enoch? Dating. We have a Parthian invasion of 40 BCE. We get the loss of land by Jews, and they're becoming tenant farmers. If you read Jesus' parables carefully, you will hear him constantly referring, right, Lamar, to the tenant farmers. Now, probably you don't grasp it yet, the sociology of space. You are a Jew. You have been living on this land. You've been farming this land for hundreds of years. Your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father. And this is the land promised to you as a descendant of Abraham. Along comes the Romans. Along comes the building of the temple with Herod. Taxes go up. You make $100 million 1 year. It's really great until the priests come and say, we want 15 million, of course. And then the laborers come and say, we want our 25 million because you owe us for laborers. And now you pay them. And then you have to pay and pay and pay. You have to pay for the grain. Now you have $10 million left. And the Romans come. And Thomas, the Romans say, we want the 25 million. You promised me. Now you've lost. And how are you going to pay? You borrow money against your land. Guess what happens? You become a tenant farmer. Now, the sociology of space, which I'm not lecturing on, but I have lectured on that, is absolutely incredibly important here. You are now a tenant farmer on land promised to you as a descendant of Abraham, and that's where your parents are buried. And maybe your children. Some of your children died earlier. Maybe some of the Romans killed your wife or your daughter. They're buried. Can you believe it? You've lost the land. Now, we can get very deep in this about Jesus, but we can't do that. But we know that Jews are losing their lands, okay? So that's one thing we're going to be picking up, is the loss of land and the Parthian invasion and the content. Why we know it is Jewish is Enoch is identified as the Son of Man. He is the eschatological judge. And there are no Christian points, or kerygma means proclamation, anywhere in the parables of Enoch. Rather astounding discovery in the last year or two. We have not found one passage that looks like it's changed by a Christian. Now that's kind of important because I told you we used to have 30 manuscripts, now we have 130, and they're finding them more and more. We're going to various lakes in Ethiopia and finding manuscripts. One of the reasons that there was a big change is that brilliant scholars said we haven't found them at Qumran. We found books of Enoch, but we haven't found the parables of Enoch, and therefore it must be much later. This is bad methodology. If you say, I don't find anything in the library, that's all you can say. You cannot make a claim from it. Lo and behold, a man from Princeton called Charlesworth said, we should not expect it at Qumran. He said at Qumran they were very interested in the books of Enoch in the early centuries of the movement, but not in the later ones. Why? Because the early copies of Enoch, the early portions, are in very old manuscripts, as I told you, before 200 BC. It was 200 years old, almost 300 years old when they put him in the caves. They're no longer interested in Enoch, okay? But the most important thing is that they believe that their teacher, the righteous teacher, the Mori HaTzedek, it says in Pesha Habakkuk, Kol Razeh Divrei Avodah HaNevi'im, all the mysteries, all of them, were revealed only to the Mori HaTzedek. So he is the hero. So when it says Enoch is the hero, they don't want it. It's in the parables of Enoch where Enoch is now identified as the eschatological judge, as the powerful figure. No one at Qumran would let that manuscript get there. Okay? The second point is this has to be a very late Christian composition because we don't have it in the early Christian authors, the great scholars of the church in the 2nd and 3rd century. And long behold, a professor from Princeton, I've never met the man, but he made a very good point that the followers of Jesus claimed he was the Son of Man. In the Gospel of John, we have the passage, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he? I am the Son of Man. It's implied in the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It is clarified with absolute certainty in John. So if you have Jesus in his community as the eschatological judge, as the Son of Man, They would not want Enoch. So the book that claims he is the powerful one would not be wanted. So we can't expect it at Qumran, we can't expect it in the early Christian writings, but if we wanted to go deeper, you could ask questions on those points. But you can begin to see that the old argument just began to evaporate, and that's what happens in scholarship. We debate and argue and began to realize that we work with a kind of scale. We don't work with certainty, we work with probability. So you would say to me, why wasn't it found in the early Christian communities? It would probably therefore be later. Okay? But now the probability shifts. We shouldn't expect it at Qumran. We shouldn't expect it among Christians. The Parthian invasion of 40 BCE may be mirrored, I'm certain it is. This is from Charlesworth Pseudepigrapha, 1 Enoch 56. People say, what was your grandfather like? I said, thank you very much. I did that book, not my grandfather. In those days, the angels will assemble and thrust themselves to the east at the Parthians and Medes. Okay, the angels are stirring up the Parthians. Look out, here they come. They will shake up the kings so that a spirit of unrest shall come upon them and stir them up from their thrones, and they will break forth from their beds like lions. Here they come. And like hungry hyenas among their own flocks. The Parthians are coming. This is a Jew. They're coming toward the Jews. And they will go up and trample upon my land, the land of my elect ones. That's clearly the Holy Land. Everybody knows that. And the land of my elect ones will be before them like a threshing floor or a highway. But the city of my righteous ones will become an obstacle to the horses. Our recent archaeological work is suggesting we find tremendous evidence of the Parthian invasion, I think at Qumran, but all along the western littoral of the Dead Sea, which means the coast of the west side of the Dead Sea. Parthian invasion from Jericho all the way down to Ein Gedi, okay? Now, in my collection on display in Princeton, you will see a Parthian rheton. It's 1st century BC. It belongs to a Parthian invader or a ruler, and it's if you know what a rheton is, it's a beautiful, beautiful wine pourer. Either you use it for pouring at a banquet, or the servant would pour it to the man. He's like this, or yes, you know. And then, or the man would pour it on him. So we do have abundant evidence. You're the only ones that know about that. I was able to acquire it recently. Evidence. Now we do have evidence that we think proves that they took Jerusalem and they got to the upper city. But of course, they were famous for their horses. Most of you know about the old city or can imagine the old city. You cannot ride a horse through the little ways. You become vulnerable. It's very easy. You and I could wipe out a great cavalryman. He can't move with his horses. And how could he get off? We wipe him out quickly with one of our bows and arrows. So what do we say? But the city of my righteous ones, but Jerusalem will become an obstacle to their horses. There is a movement now to recognize we're getting abundant evidence of the Parthian invasion of 40 BC. That is why Herod was called to Rome. And in Rome, before the Roman Senate, a man by the name of Antony, you know about Antony and Cleopatra. Gentlemen, I recommend that we appoint Herod as king of the Jews. Unanimous vote. Now Herod walks out of the Senate as king of the Jews. He was astounded. And guess who walks on his left and right? Octavian, who's going to become Augustus, and Antony. That's 40. Why did they choose him? Because he was the LeBron James of the 40s BC. He was strong. He was a great warrior. He and his father were great at defeating people. Now, it wasn't just Herod. The Romans were working with him, but that is why he was called King of the Jews. If you listen carefully, you can see tension developing between Herod and a man named Yeshua bar Yehoseph. But that's another story. Jesus of Nazareth. All right. Now, you can see where we're going. And this is a coin. And this is the kings of Parthia. This is Pacorus. This is dated about 50 BC. And you have here, this is a Parthian coin. I wish I could say I found it in Jerusalem. I wish I could say I found it in Jericho. We haven't found it yet. This is a coin, we haven't found it. We haven't found his coins. The reason I show this to you is you get the face of a Parthian warrior. Okay? Now you know the Parthians are not only in Parthia. The righteous Jews now are losing their dry land. This is one of my major contributions to the discussion. And more scholars, to begin with, people said, but there's dry land everywhere. If the Herodians take the dry land, you are left with what? Wow, I couldn't get scholars to say that. So you look not for dry land, but you look for what? Thank you. So that's what I'm looking for. The only place where I can find wet land that would be mosquitoes and snakes and you can't grow crops is the Hula Valley, which is just by Dan and by Hermon. Okay, now we have to read what it says. Gosh, everybody gets an A+. Note the parables of Enoch. The strong and mighty possess the dry ground. That seems to me that I want the dry ground, but I can't get it. Okay? They are the mighty landowners. That means I'm no longer mighty and I don't own my land. Okay? This is a Jew writing. According to a different translator, they rule the dry ground. These are sinners and lawless ones who will soon be judged and punished by, can you believe it? The Son of Man. Only in the parables of Enoch. We continue. Parables of Enoch 62 identifies the evil ones as the kings, the governors, the high officials. Oh my goodness. You have a paradigm from antiquity. Curses on kings and rulers. Curses on kings and rulers. Someone has said curses on kings and rulers and landowners. Why would they add that? They're taking our land. Another translation is those who possess the earth. This refrain appears 3 times in chapter 62, verses 1, 3, and 6. In Parables of Enoch 63, punishment is reserved for the mighty, the kings, the exalted. This is a refrain we've heard from the earliest writings of the humans. Curses on kings and rulers and the wealthy. But now someone adds, and those who possess the dry ground. Are you catching the point yet? These people are losing the dry ground. Stay tuned and I'll explain to you why that's bad. What stands out as an addition to a well-known tupos, the cursing of kings and rulers, is the mentioning of landlords. They're taking our land. They're lording it over us. Jewish farmers are becoming tenant farmers. During the time of the Herodian dynasties, Jews lost their land to Herod and his hierarchy. This is Antiquities by Josephus. Now, our economic research is proving as following. At the beginning of Herod's rule, most of the Jews had land. At the end of it, 2/3 of the arable land belonged to Herod and his dynasty. You say, why not all 3? Well, they had to tax someone. Okay? So you can say almost all of the land that could be tilled. You know, you want barley, you want wheat. Either you fish or you farm for barley or wheat or olives. Well, you can't do that in swamps. You say, why did you mention swamps? Oh, you are so gifted. I cannot believe it. The verdant area of Yesud HaMa'alah, north of Hatzor and the Dishon stream, was a threatening swamp until about 100 years ago. You say, wow, but can you show me a picture? You know, I wish I had found one. You know, I would love to show you a picture. Oh, there it is. The Hula Valley before it was drained. Now, this gives you an idea. You're taking all the dry land. What are we left with? This. You say, show me another one. Okay, there you go. Some of you know the Hula Valley. Some of you live there. The Hula Valley, as the draining begins. Note the eucalyptus trees. These were planted, and that was because they absorbed so much water. So when you go around with me, you will see eucalyptus trees, so many of them. Now they're making a mistake, they're cutting them down. See, they drain the area. You can see the swamps. The Hula Valley as the draining begins. A swamp in the Hula Valley. This is what you're left with. Have I made my point? Only in this document does it make it clear that we have curses on landowners and, kings and rulers and landowners, those who are taking all the dry land. So we've now dated it. That is my contribution to this research. This is the Hula Valley today, looking from the northwest. Now we have a view from Ramat HaNadiv. This is a Roman villa. Caesarea Maritima is down here. We're down now in Lower Galilee. But look at this. if we can say that this author is saying you're taking all the dry land, then the people who have the dry land are the billionaires. Why? They're making all the money. So when we sit here, and I was there doing the excavations, I can imagine all of this now belonged to this man. All the Jews living here that were growing wheat and barley and olives and your vineyards, all of it belongs to this man. You say, oh, come on, it's not. Yes, it is. It's very impressive. Look at how beautiful this is. Of course, this is Byzantine built up on top of it. But down we have amazing Herodian structure. Look at this, a caldarium, a Roman bathhouse at Ramat HaNadiv. Amazing. Look how beautifully made this is. This was made by one of the Herodians. I think we can make a point that maybe Antipas lived here before he went and became governor of Galilee. Now that's it. If you don't believe me, I give up. This is what they built. How did they build it? They took your land and Richard your land, your either or land. He said, you call me either Richard or Dick, so he's either or. This is what it looked like. Reconstruction of a Roman bath at Ramat HaNadiv. Unbelievable. When you go there, you can still see the rolling fresh water. Now we're going to read Enoch 57, chariot wheels. Okay, I'm going to say to you, I've come to the conclusion, and so are the people else, so I didn't come to this first. I was coming at, and I have to say that other people have now said it, and they're independently saying it. That is, the parables of Enoch were composed at Migdal. Now, first of all, I want you to learn 1 Enoch 57. I had another vision of a whole array of chariots. Now, we're going to be looking for an image of a chariot, okay? Loaded with people, and they were advancing upon the air from the east and from the west until midday. And the sound of their chariots, see, I want you to catch the point, was clamorous. And when this commotion took place, the holy ones in heaven took notice of it, and the pillars of the earth were shaken from their foundations, literally from their seats. And the sound of the noise could be heard from the extreme end of the sky until the extreme end of the earth in 1 hour or 1 day. Wow. These people believed that they saw a vision of the coming of chariots. Okay? We're now on the top of Migdal, and we're looking down, we're top of Arbel, and we're looking down on Migdal. This is, in fact, Migdal. Migdal means tower. And our work around Migdal, the tower, in Migdal, the village, we have found evidence that this tower is early Byzantine or late Roman. We used to think it was medieval. And this is the area where we think was the Hagora. The sea was up to here, and we have, when I was digging there, we exposed the harbor, and the harbor's plastered. And we thought, how did they get plaster? And then we realized Caesarea Maritima was plastered. So this is quite a very wealthy Jewish town. And it's in this area, before they dug, this is where they're going to find a synagogue. And this is it. The room that may be a scriptorium is just to the west of the pre-70 synagogue. And I'll show you the synagogue in a moment. But this is the most important point I want to make. I suggested to people that this is probably a scriptorium where they made scrolls and where they copied scrolls. And people say that's most likely because it's beside a synagogue, and that's where you would make a scroll. We know many of the scrolls at Qumran, almost all of them, are from somewhere else, from every Jewish community in the Holy Land. So that's our work on the Dead Sea Scrolls, so we're wondering what was perhaps composed there. Now, this is very important. Let me help you understand it. We are in the Migdal Synagogue and the unfinished mosaic. You can see the mosaic, but it didn't get finished, which meant that it was destroyed before it was finished. The coins we have found in the Migdal Synagogue date from the middle of the 1st century BC until the 2nd year of the revolt, 67. And in 67, Titus with the Roman legions. Now, I'll help you understand this. We don't know how many people lived in Migdal. Josephus said 40,000. We're estimating maybe 5,000. It's a huge city. Maybe 100, 150 in Nazareth, 1,500 in Capernaum, maybe 5,000. Go back with me to Nazareth, maybe 150 people. That's what I've said several times on television. That's a good guess. How many Roman soldiers? Think about Gladiators, if you saw that movie. Highly trained killers. going against farmers that, you know, they maybe know how to kill a hyena. How many men do you think landed? When I asked my students, they say, you know, maybe 5,000. That would be too many. Come on. 60,000. So here they come with their chariots. Here they come with their ramrods, the weapons of war, with their ox carts. 60,000, but 10,000 join them from the mountains of Lebanon. These are highly skilled mountain warriors. So now you have 70,000 men. It's like a tsunami coming through Galilee. No wonder Sepphoris says, big time out, we're with you. No wonder Tiberius says, we're not going to fight against you. Come on in, take whatever you want. But there was a big battle at Migdol. And Titus walks back and forth. He says, gentlemen, it sounds like Braveheart, you know. Everybody's going to die. Would you rather die in your bed? Or would you like to die as a man? Many of us will die today. I am going to lead you. And it's a wonderful speech made perhaps by Josephus, but he was there. Now, we haven't found his tape recorder, but we're not looking for it actually, but he had a great memory. It's a wonderful story. So the Migdol was taken in 67, and we have evidence of it from Josephus, and now archaeological evidence. This was never finished. You see how you work as an archaeologist? Observe and look. We see a beautiful mosaic in a synagogue, but why wasn't it finished? I just explained it to you. And look what a beautiful the synagogue is. You have frescoed walls. You can have the benches. It's just amazing to go there. And this is what I wanted you to see. This is the stone that was found in the synagogue. All of the images are coming right from the temple. So the connection between Lower Galilee and the temple is absolutely as we thought it would be. Jesus goes up frequently to the temple. He's from this area. He's these type of Jews. The temple was the place to worship God, the house of God. Okay, but we still haven't made the major point. The top of it, you see all these beautiful images. Top of the stone found, it's a massive stone found in the Migdal synagogue. You know this dates before 67. Now look at that. Flames and chariot wheels. In the iconography of this synagogue, which dates before 67, we have evidence of those chariots, those symbols that we found in the parables of Enoch. Enoch and Apocalypticism perhaps reflected on the side of the stone. Note the chariot wheels and the flames below. These are chariot wheels, and so we have reason to suggest that from Migdal you can see Hermon. From Migdal you can feel the waters of Dan as they pour into the Kinnereth. From Migdal we have an image that talks and opens our eyes to what was just being written nearby. And many scholars are saying the only place where the parables of Enoch could be composed in Lower Galilee is in that wealthy Jewish town known as Migdal. Now, many of you know about it because there was a woman named Mary. Mary of Migdal, Mary Magdalene. So you've learned a lot. Now look at chariot wheels again. I read it to you. I had another vision, a whole array of chariots, and the sound of the chariots. Just to help you get it again. This is important. We're finding it emphasized in the parables of Enoch, and we're finding it emphasized. Remember, they took time. What are we going to put on the side? They're going to put something that connects with their beliefs. It's not just, let's put something on the wall. They have it in the middle of the synagogue, and it's a Torah shrine where they would put a Torah scroll. Modern Nazareth, you can see the Church of the Annunciation. This, you can see that we're coming. This is modern, and Jesus would have gone down the Turin Valley, descending from the Nazareth range, going east toward the Lower Galilee. Now we want to pick up the importance of Enoch. Now there's something called Bereshith, some people call it Genesis. In 5:24 we find this, V'yithalech Hanoch, and he walked constantly, Hanoch. Enoch walked constantly. Now walking is a euphemism for behaving morally. Halakha is the Jewish term for moral behavior. So he is walking. So it's not, he's just sauntering along. He's walking. He's behaving morally. V'yithalech Hanok eth ha'Elohim. He walked constantly with God. This is Genesis. They are saying Enoch was morally perfect. Ve'enenu. Wow, what does that mean? And he was not. So the author wants to make it clear what is ve'enu. Ki lakach oto Elohim. He was not because God took him. Enoch walked continuously with or beside God. Eth can be beside, and was not because God took him. He never died. Now, in this community, you could think about the community that thinks about Jesus' resurrection. This community believes Enoch is alive because he walked continuously and perfectly with God. So now you can communicate with him. The author implies that Enoch did not die. The repetitive formula in Genesis 5, v'yamut, and he died, is conspicuously absent. The expression ve'enenu is odd, and the author seems to know that fact by adding ki lakach oto Elohim. Enoch is alive. Where is he? He's with God. Why? Because he walked beside God. He is with God in heaven. This is very important. This is not Enoch literature. This is Bereshit. This is Genesis. So you can see the source of their inspiration, okay? Enoch is the hero. Seventh, after Adam, seventh means perfect timing. God is the judge. Now I want to pick this up. In the Old Testament and the apocryphal books, God is the judge. It astounds me. It's everywhere. All right, let's find 1 Chronicles. He is the Lord our God. His judgments are on the earth. God is judge. Psalm 7. God is a righteous judge. Psalm 50. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Psalm 75. But it is God who executes judgment. 4th Ezra, apocalypse written just after the destruction of Jerusalem. Indeed, God is the judge. 4th Ezra 14. The Most High is a righteous judge. 4th Ezra 16. Behold, God is the judge. 2nd Baruch, an apocalypse written near Jerusalem just after 4th Ezra. For the Most High will surely judge. The Most High is judge, he's God. And then Sibylline Oracles, the Greek pseudepigraphical text. Sibylline Oracles 3, the Creator, he is the just judge. Now when we get to the time of judgment, many people agree that we will be standing before someone as judge. Okay? They believed it too. During the time of Jesus, only those within the Enoch groups believed that the Son of Man was judged. Look in Enoch 62. On the day of judgment, all the kings and all the landlords, aha, I'm going to get him, shall see and recognize him, how he sits on the throne of his glory. Then pain shall seize them when they see that Son of Man sitting on the throne of his glory. These kings and all the landlords, those who took our land, shall try to bless, glorify, extol him who rules over everything, him who has been concealed. The Son of Man is the eschatological judge. The elect one, the Son of Man, and the Messiah signify the eschatological judge. He will sit on the throne and judge the kings and landowners, the only economic profession selected for mentioning, and you know why. 1 Enoch 62, that's one of the parables of Enoch. On that day, all the kings, the governors, the high officials, and those who rule the land shall fall down before him on their faces and worship him and raise their hopes in that Son of Man. They shall beg and plead for mercy. He is the judge. Jesus and the Son of Man, and the Son of Man in myth and history, Fred Borsch stated, an important and often noted characteristic of the Son of Man's sayings is the rule that only Jesus speaks about the Son of Man. Throughout the New Testament. Let's look at Matthew 16. What is Jesus claiming? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and they will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. To judge, of course. Look at John 5. Very truly I tell you, the hour is coming and now here, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For just as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. Wow. Recall Mark 14, he came, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am. And you will see that Son of Man seated on the right hand of the power and coming in the clouds of heaven." Mark 14, New Revised Standard Version. The Son of Man is coming and he will judge. The connection between the Messiah and the Son of Man is difficult to explain. It's only explained if we see the parables of Enoch behind Matthew, behind Mark, and behind Jesus' sayings. Now, is the book up here? I, at lunch, was with the publisher of T&T Clark, and this is the book. It's a consortium of scholars that have been brought together, and it's called, you can see the scholars that were edited, Parables of Enoch, A Paradigm Shift. You know all about this. And it's in the series, which is the Bloomsbury Press, Volume 11 of the T&T Clark Jewish and Christian Text series.